Good day to you. Shall we get started? We begin in constructive rest posture. So we recline on our back with our knees bent, feet standing on the mat. The hands resting somewhere easily next to the pelvis. We find our breath. And gently allow the breath to move as it will. We don't have to organize it or direct it. We just settle in, noticing the inhale and the exhale. Now we're going to bring our attention to the back side of the pelvis. So to me, the pelvis looks kind of like a butterfly. And in the center is a triangular grouping of bones called the sacrum. And as we rest here, we're going to notice whether or not our sacrum is centered and the weight of our body is resting on the sacrum. We can rock a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left. And then we come back to center. And as we go through this next sequence of practices, we're going to do our best to pretend like the sacrum is a clock. So if we roll on the sacrum down toward the tailbone, we're aiming to 6 o'clock. And if we're rolling up toward the head, we're at 12 o'clock. If we go a little bit to one side, it's 9, and to the other side, it's 3. So what we're aiming to do with this practice, and so that what we're going to be doing is familiar to most of us. We're going to be focusing on keeping that clock, the sacral clock, connected to the floor. So we don't want to lift away from the 6. So we're going to begin with our pelvic tilt cycle. So we begin with an in-breath, and we're going to be lifting the waist off the floor, and we're rolling down towards 6 o'clock. And then we roll on the pelvis, so we take the head, flatten the waist, the head tilts back. We're at 12. We're just going to go back and forth a few times, making it really gentle, no extremes here. And then we're going to pause. We're going to be drawing our right leg in to our heart. So this is called Apanasana. We're going to begin by stabilizing in that sacral clock. So we're pressing the whole structure of the sacrum into the floor, which also activates the low back. And we're going to draw the knee in on an exhale. And when we exhale, we're going to make a sound, either a whoosh or a psst, because we want to activate the transverse abdominis, that deep muscle in the low belly. So breathe in. And on the out breath, make a sound as we draw the leg up and in. When we land here, we're either going to be holding on top of the shin, but we don't want to lift up and take the tailbone up. We want to keep that sacrum on the floor. So maybe holding behind the knee is going to be easier. And we'll notice there's maybe a bend in our elbow. So we're just going to slowly extend the leg and bend the knee. We're just getting the feel for what it's like to keep the sacrum stabilized here. One more. Draw the knee in again, but keep rolling down toward the tailbone so the sacrum doesn't come up. We're drawing the knee in without drawing the pelvis up. It's a small action. It will offer benefits. And then we release this to the floor. So what we're doing is a sequence to stabilize the pelvis. And then when we come to standing, we're going to see how that affects the knees and the feet. So pausing here, notice the difference between the right and the left side again. When we lift, we're going to make a psst sound or a big whooshing sound because we're pressing into our low back. We're pressing the sacrum into the floor. We're lifting on the exhale. Breathe in and psst. Holding that knee in without drawing the pelvis up. We're going to keep that sacrum nice and stabilized. And then we extend the leg any amount. And then we bend the knee, and you'll notice my foot stays flexed. So the toes are coming back toward the knees. That helps to protect the support system around the knee. And then we release to the floor. We're going to scoot that right leg out long. Again, we're focusing on keeping the sacrum anchored to the floor. So there's a little pressure into the low back. And then we're going to draw that left knee in on an out breath. So while we pause here, we're going to get ready to do a little bit more exploration into keeping the pelvis, the sacrum specifically stabilized. On the next out breath, we're going to anchor the sacrum, make the sound of psst or whoosh as we lift, because it's the out breath, right? And we're going to lift this leg and we're going to take it toward the ceiling. Breathe in on the out breath. Bend the knee as needed, especially if the hamstrings are tight. Breathe here. And then on the next out breath, press into the sacrum. So we're not rocking up. We're keeping that sacrum on the floor. We're going to release this with sound on the out breath. We're going to do it again. Breathe in. Stable sacrum. Release with the sound. Then one more time. Out breath is the lift. Stable sacrum. And then release to the floor. We come back to constructive rest. So that worked deep abdominals, but it's also working the pelvis, the hip joints. It's doing a lot of different little things. And so you might feel that your musculature fatigues just a little bit. We'll take the pause. And now we slide that left leg long. Remember, we lift on the exhale. We're finding that nice center in our pelvis, breathing in. And on the exhale, to get that knee up and in. We're going to be lifting that left leg now on the exhale. Remember, we're not pulling up. We want to keep that that sacral bone system stabilized. Breathe in. And on the exhale, breathe in. On the exhale, release. Breathe in. On the exhale, lift. Breathe in. On the exhale, release. One more time. Breathe in. On the exhale, lift. Breathe in. On the exhale, release. We're coming back to constructive rest. And we'll just pause here for a moment. So we're probably all feeling that the abdominals are a little bit fired up. The hip joints are a little bit fired up. And we may have noticed that the tendency with Apanasana is to roll all the way up almost to the rib cage instead of keeping the sacrum resting firmly on the floor. So when we lift our legs without this intentional connection into our sacrum, we're missing the work that can happen in the lower abdominal muscles, which is vital for low back health. We're going to just take a little bit of time here in a windshield wiper revolved twist. So we're going to take the right leg rested on the floor. Our feet are as wide as the mat. We've got our arms floating out to T in the back of the hands resting on the floor. We're getting a nice deep stretch here. And if it feels like too much strain on the inner knee, you take a block. I like to turn it a little bit sideways and just rest the weight of the leg on the block. So we'll feel this in the hip joint and on the outside of the hip also, which we're going to come to in a moment with some standing postures, really helping to figure out how to strengthen the outer layer of the hip joint, the support system on the side of the hip. We're going to come back. We're going to reverse this. We're going to roll now to the opposite side. And we're taking that left leg to the floor. And you might notice, ooh, I have more mobility going this way than the other way, or vice versa. We're pausing. We're breathing. We're letting this posture deepen as it begins to work in this part of our musculature. Gently coming back to center now. If you have a block on the mat, we're going to scoot it out of the way. Put it to the side. We're coming back to stabilizing the sacrum. So feeling the sacrum as the balance point of the pelvis. So maybe rock a little to the right, a little to the left, and see where the center is to the best of your awareness. We're going to slide the left leg long now. And on the out breath, we're going to the right leg in. So we're holding this leg, keeping the sacrum as stable as possible. We're not rolling up all the way to the waist. And now on the next out breath, we're going to lift the left leg. It's going to be long. Both feet are flexed. We're going to lift the left leg and we're going to lift the head. Breathe in. On the out breath, and release. We're going to do that 2 more times, lifting on the exhale. Breathe in, release on the exhale. One more time, breathing in, lifting on the exhale. Releasing on the exhale. The right leg comes back to the mat. The left foot comes up to meet it. We pause here. So when we're lifting the opposite leg, we're lifting at 6, 8, 12 inches. We don't have to lift it that high. And we're engaging the low belly muscles with each exhaling sound. Let's do this again on the other side. So now the right leg goes long. That foot's nice and flexed. Breathe in and the left leg up and in. Make sure that clock is anchored. The pelvis, the sacrum, in the center of the pelvis. On the out breath, we're going to the head and the leg up, both feet are flexed. Breathe in and to the floor. Breathe in. On the out breath, lift. Breathe in and release. Breathe out and release, excuse me. And one more time. On the out breath, we lift. Keeping awareness of the sacrum, breathe in. And on the out breath, feet come to constructive rest. Touch the insteps. Rock the pelvis gently right and left. Now we're going to do revolved belly twist, Jatara Parivartanasana. This is the one where we draw the knees up and in. We keep the sacrum on the floor, stabilized our center of balance in our pelvis. Could draw the legs in one at a time or simultaneously doing it on an out breath. And then we're going to take the knees halfway toward the floor and back to center, halfway to the other side and back to center, or maybe even just 6 inches, or maybe even just 1. We're going to keep the pelvis stable. Breathe in, anchor into the sacrum, draw both knees up, and take it to the right. And back to center. So we are rocking on the pelvis, right and left, but we come back to center ground on the sacrum. Take it to the right. So we don't want to lean too far up, or we don't want to take our pelvis too far up toward our heart. We want to keep the knees a little lower here, a little further away from our tongue. And maybe it feels good to release the hands. And we don't have to go very far. This is a real help for the low back. One more time to the left. When we come back to center, hug. Maybe rocking a little bit up above the sacrum, then come back to the sacrum for stability. And then on the out breath, with a psst, we lower both feet. Psst. Oh, settle here with a pause and luscious, deep, connected breath. We're going to come onto hands and knees. Maybe you want to roll to one side and press yourself up, or maybe you want to rock up to seated. Whatever feels best for you. We're going to pause for a moment here. And then we're going to come into a little bit of a cat-cow. So we have nice wide fingers. We're pressing into the fingertips. We're pressing into the ball mounds of the hands where the fingers meet the hand. The hands are a little in front of the shoulders. We've got external rotation here. So we've moved the elbow creases a little bit toward the front edge of the mat. We've got a couple hand width distance between our knees. We're going to rock forward, toes turn under, elongate through the head and neck, and then let the upper back stretch. So it's less about dropping the belly, more about stretching through the upper back. And then we're coming back into cat. Tops of the feet rest on the mat. And then we create the arch between the shoulder blades. Let the head relax down. Coming forward on the next in-breath. If it's okay, turn the toes under. Sometimes that's a challenge. And then we elongate the neck and lift, feeling a stretch in the upper back. On the next out breath, flatten the tops of the feet and expand between the shoulder blades. Chin's coming toward the heart. And then we're going to bring the forearms to the floor. Wag the tail just a little bit. Maybe the head comes toward the floor. Maybe the heels sink a little bit closer to the hips sink a little closer to the heel. Now we're going to come back up. We're going to find our best posture here. So we've got wide starfish hands. Maybe the crease of the hand is going to be facing the front edge of the mat. Fingers are wide, fingertips pressing in. The elbow creases are turned toward the front of the mat. We turn the toes under. We're going to lift into down dog here. So we're going to start with bent knees as we come into dog. So keep those knees soft. And then maybe stretch them a little, make the legs a little straighter, and then bend the knees and stretch. And bend the knees and straighten, and bend the knees and straighten. And then we're going to walk our hands and feet together. We're in the bottom of a forward fold. Bend your knees as needed to be in this posture. And then on the in-breath, sweeping up, we come to mountain. So now I'm going to invite you to grab a block and go near a wall or the back of a sofa, something that's higher than a chair. We want a little bit more support than a chair. And what we're going to do today is we're going to release the psoas. So that's the big muscle that starts up here, dives down into the pelvis, is our hip flexor, and can create tightness in the low back. And we're going to explore how to do single leg stands in a way that we are not putting extra pressure into our hip. So we're going to begin with the block. And we're going to bring that block right next to our hip. I'm starting with the left hip. And so I'm just resting it against my hip. It's just soft. So what I'm going to do is I'm shifting my weight to the right side and then come back to center. Shift the weight to the right side and then come back to center. Now shift the weight to the left side. Come back to center. Now we're going to lift the right foot and we're going to see if we can do it by keeping the hip joint on the left side lined up with the knee and the ankle. So what we're looking for is not to press into the block. So a lot of times when we're shifting weight or doing weight-bearing postures, we're lifting against the action. So what we're looking to do here is to keep, we were going the other way. We're going to keep this hip level. Oop. Never. It's all about the props, right? So we're not tucking this hip out to lift. We're not pushing this hip out to lift. We're trying to keep our hips in alignment. So we're coming into a standing posture on the right leg with this block so that our hip isn't pressed out to get away from the stretch. We want it lined up. I'm going to explain that again because I threw my block away. So we're going to do it on this side. And what we're going to do is we're going to notice how when we shift our weight to the right foot, how there's a tendency to take the hip out. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I've been working with how to stabilize knees. And I discovered that when I do this, I'm doing shearing force all the way down my leg. So when I lift, I've got this block here just to remind me to keep that side of my pelvis stable while I lift the other foot. So I'm trying to line up my hip joint, my knee, and my ankle. Release and come to the other side again. So we're shifting the weight now to the left leg and we're doing our best to not punch our hip out. And maybe bring this knee up just a little bit more. And we can play with it a little bit, noticing that when I stabilize, there's this place where I'm very, very solid. When I connect with all of this musculature. So when I'm going like this, I'm letting all of these muscles get all wobbly and not do any support. This is an act of supporting my standing leg. So we're back here. We're shifting the weight to the left leg and we're doing our best. We're going to lift the right knee. And we're feeling our way from our hip joint down into our ankle. And then we release. Now we're going to do something on the wall that takes advantage of this. We can take the block out of the hand. We're going to have the block a little bit away from the wall and we're going to come stand on the block. We bring so I'm on my left leg. I've got my right toes on the floor. So let the hip move a little bit. So let the left hip move a little to the left, then bring it back to center, a little to the right, bring it back to center. And then press into the foot to find the place where the hip lines up with the ankle, and notice how that right foot gets a little lighter. So I'm not so much leaning into the wall as really anchoring into my leg. And we're going to swing our foot. And we're going to do our best to move the swing from the hip joint, not from the knee, from the hip joint, not from the upper body, from the hip joint. Couple more times. Then touch the toes down. Step off the block. Come to standing. And it might feel like the side with the leg that we were swinging, it feels a little longer. So we're doing a release from up here all the way in to the hip joint. So now we're going to switch sides. Come to standing on the block. The heart is lifted. We notice whether or not we've taken our hip. So we're the right hip, the left hip, we haven't taken the left hip toward the wall. We're finding a nice stance. So take the left hip to the wall, toe on the floor. Now take the left hip to center and watch how the right foot all of a sudden becomes light. Now we're going to swing 20 times here. Nice long leg, not swinging from the knee, not swinging from the rib cage. A couple more. And then we're going to step off the block. We come to mountain. So again, the idea here is when we're coming into a single leg standing posture, it's not about shifting the hip as much as it is lining up the hip joint with the knee and with the ankle. We're going to test this. So this is a balance practice also. If you want to have a chair nearby or you want to do it near the wall, that's great. What we're going to do is we're going to shift the weight first to the left foot. We're going to see if we can find that centered place where the hip joint, the knee, and the ankle are aligned. Let the hip slide out, bring it back in. And then we're going to just come onto the tiptoes of the right foot. So bring that hip back to center, not forward, not back, not right, but keep the hip joint lined up. And then if that feels strong and stable, maybe we're going to lift the right foot off the mat any amount. So what we're doing here is what we did on the floor. This is Apanasana. And you might feel a real wobble in the legs, but notice how if we can stabilize here, we're strengthening the side of the hip, come back to the mat, pause here and notice. So we're strengthening this side, these muscles all along here that we let go slack, and then we're diving into tendons and ligaments and things like that instead of using the musculature. So We're moving now to the right side, and we're going to slide the pelvis out, slide the hip joint out. Notice that's what that feels like. Bring it back to a nice neutral where it's stacked above the knee, above the ankle. Take it to the left side, a little bit forward and a little bit back, and then find that sweet spot where the hip, knee, and ankle are aligned. The foot's going to feel grounded. We're coming onto the tiptoes now of the left foot. The arms can float out or touch the wall as we lift that left leg, any amount. Breathing here. And then back to the mat. Come to the first side. So now we're going to march with this. We're going to lift for 2 breaths, release. Lift for 2 breaths, opposite hand, back to center, lifting and seeing if we can find that hip to ankle connection in the standing leg that does not include jutting the hip out. So this would work also in tree pose, where we have a tendency to throw our weight into the hip joint away from the center. We're trying to keep this centered. And then we're going to pause. And we're in mountain. We're going to return to the floor now by traveling through downward facing dog. So coming to the top of the mat. The arms are going to float up. We fold forward. Hands touch the mat, bend the knees as needed. On the in-breath, we half lift. On the out-breath, the hands come to the mat. We step or hop our feet back into downward facing dog. Nice external rotation, pressing into the ball mound and the fingertips of the hands. We're 10 breaths here. Soften between the shoulder blades. Let the head relax with a yes and no. One more breath here. And then slowly bringing the knees to the mat. We're going to come back into constructive rest posture. So rolling back onto the back. And as we settle here, notice the sacrum in the middle of the pelvis. Is it a little more clear now? Can it be really noticed? So the sacrum is a triangle. It has 5 bones in it. And while it's fused together, the bones still have a little bit of mobility and can move. And that can cause real back pain, can cause us to compensate by pressing our weight into places where our weight doesn't need to be, or away from places where the weight of our body could really be supported. So when we can find our sacrum, sometimes we can find a little bit more connection between the hip joint, the knee, and the ankle. Let your breath soften, deepen, become your anchor for relaxation as we enter our time of Shavasana. So finding your resting posture. Today's thought is from Leonard Cohen. May you be surrounded by friends and family. And if this is not your lot, may the blessings find you in solitude. Breath begins to deepen. Fingers and toes enlivened. A gentle upturn of the corners of the mouth. Gently rolling to one side or finding your way to seated. We're going to open our arms wide. We gather all the blessings. They already exist. And we draw them in appreciation and gratitude into our hearts, into our soft, tender hearts. Gratitude, appreciation, and deep love. Together we all say, Namaste.